At Casey Aviation, and I really think in all of the aviation market, the whole aviation world is sad right now. Rob Holland died in a crash. I mean, gosh, this is the guy that you would never expect to have crashed an airplane. But here he did have a crash. We've had it seems like a rash of crashes lately, but this is one no one ever expected. And I've got Clint Goff. Clint, you're here with me on the Malibu Guru Podcast to talk about Rob Holland. Oh my gosh, can you believe that this guy crashed an airplane?
Such a very talented guy. I mean, well respected in the aviation community. I mean, just received so many awards over the years. Terrible loss.
Terrible loss. Not just, let's talk about some awards. Listen to some of this. 6-time freestyle aerobatic champion, 13-time national aerobatic champion, 14-time U.S. freestyle aerobatic champion, honorary Blue Angel, honorary Snowbird, won the Charlie Hilliard Award, 5 times. You were talking about at the very, very top of the aerobatic world. This is the guy. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he really was. And we just have to go back and look at all of his accomplishments because as pilots, we all strive to be better. And he was the best of the best.
He was the best of the best. It's funny. I fly T-28s. And we have the Trojan Flyers, which I don't get to fly, but I get to fly the T-28. But we have 2 guys that Robert and Skip that fly on air shows, and they fly all over the nation and even some international stuff as well. They're very active in the air show world. So we get to move the T-28s to air shows for them. And when we go to the air shows, we get to talk with them, get to hobnob a little bit with the air show people, which is kind of fun to be there. I'm not an air show performer. I would love to have that ability. I don't. But certain people do. They're at the top of the game. And I remember being at Oshkosh. I had Robert there with me, and we were standing by the T-28, and we were sort of bantering back and forth. And then Rob Holland, the air show was going on, and Rob Holland took off in his airplane. And basically Robert said, "Time out, Joe. We got to watch this." And all of the air show performers that were hanging around in this area basically said, "We all got to watch Rob Holland do his thing." Here's the point: the air show people stop what they're doing to watch Rob Holland do his stuff.
Right.
It's that good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When it'd be like Michael Jordan walking into the room, or Wilt Chamberlain, or Magic Johnson. They're going to play back. People are going to watch them because the basketball players watch those guys.
Right.
Figure out what to do. He's at the very top of the game. But here he crashed an airplane. The question is why, and the answer is
jam flight control is what it's looking like.
It's what it's looking like, is a jam flight control. And if you look at he basically had a little device that he added onto the airplane, or that was added onto the airplane that you could. It could be a balance, basically, where you could add weight to a certain regime just to fine tune the flight controls for certain, like if he was going to do certain types of maneuvers, then having the weights in these little areas to balance the flight controls would assist in that. We're talking about finely tuning an airplane. It looks like one of the weights, a screw backed out, and when the screw backs out, it jams the flight control so that you can't move the elevator. You've got, when this occurs, you've got a virtually unflyable airplane.
Right. We hear of crashes every day, but most of those crashes that we hear about, a lot of those are due to pilot error.
Right.
Usually not mechanical or something like that.
That's right.
In that situation, I'm sure Rob, he flew it all the way.
One of the things is that was it Bob Hoover that came out and said, when you have an airplane with a problem, you fly that airplane as deep into the crash as you possibly, as far into the crash, fly the biggest part of the airplane as far into the crash as you possibly. I've got to think that I bet you, as he's coming down to that runway, I bet he was working the situation in a way that was incredible, and just simply at the very end couldn't control it anymore. We used to practice a Black Hawk has a stabilator in the back of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if the stabilator goes full down in forward flight, it's a uncontrollable aircraft. Or if you had a cyclic jam, we used to practice in the simulator because you can move the stabilator, you can move it, and we would practice pitching the helicopter with a jam cyclic, and just to see if we could. And most of the time we couldn't. I mean, if in this airplane, if you have a jammed elevator, you're not moving the elevator. Effectively, it means that you have a horizontal stabilizer and now an elevator that is a horizontal stabilizer because you can't move it. And the only thing that can move is the pitch trim. But now the pitch trim works in exact opposite of what it normally would because your elevator's jammed.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up in this really, really, really difficult situation. The only thing you can do is fly the airplane with with power, and by moving the elevator trim in the opposite direction. I'm talking about most people couldn't even dream of doing that. The best in the world, in this case, couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a jam flight control is one of the worst things that you can possibly do. Possibly experience.
Right. So are there any PA-46 accidents that have happened in the past due
to a jam flight control?
Due to jam flight control.
The answer is I don't know of a jam flight control. I do know of a flight control that was rigged improperly. So I'll give you a couple of instances of where I've seen this before. One is there was a jet prop that came out of a maintenance facility where they took off all the flight controls and took off the elevator and the ailerons, put them all back on, but they put them on improperly. They hooked the wrong cable up to the wrong port. And so, in other words, so they were cross-controlled. Mm-hmm. When you put left aileron, the aileron went the wrong direction. Mm. Actually had a test pilot on board that was flying the airplane, and that test pilot crashed the airplane.
Wow.
And fatal crash, 2 people died. It was a big deal. It was probably 12, 15 years ago or so. But that you can definitely get a jam flight control, or you can definitely get a misrigged flight control. I'll give you another one that I've saw one time is an airplane coming out of maintenance, and the trim was fully, the rudder trim was fully to one side. In other words, the maintenance person had moved the trim to make sure it works, but left it fully left. And I barreled down the runway, and the airplane's going left. What do you do? No, you got to close the throttle or close the power lever in this case, and stop there and go, oh my gosh, I didn't check that trim. It's a simple thing that any pilot could do, but it just goes to show, especially after a maintenance event. You have a maintenance event, man, you better do a good check. I mean, you better do a full check. Have you been taught to do flight controls check?
Absolutely.
How do you do it?
I've always been going by the checklist. You look at the checklist, you've already, master switch has been on, engine's already started. You're taxiing out, flight control's free and correct. I
wish I could remember the pilot that taught me this, but basically you do a flight controls check before you ever get into the airplane. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, when I learned to fly T-28s, Chip taught me this as well, that you get in the airplane, you do the flight controls check when you first get in the airplane. First thing, get in the airplane. The reason why is when you move the flight controls, you can listen, you can hear. And, if the engine's running, the battery switch is on, you got avionics fans on, or whatever the case is, you're not going to hear those nuanced noises that would happen if you have a jammed flight control, a thud or a clunk or a thump, rubbing wires or something that, you never knew.
Well, I know if you're following your checklist, as you go inside the cockpit of the airplane, if you have a gust lock in, you remove that gust lock, and then you do your walk around of the airplane, you're out there physically moving those flight controls.
It's not a bad idea at all.
Right.
I tell you, it's a great habit. When you first get into airplane, do a flight controls check. It'll tell you so much about, is your seat position correct? Is the person that's in the other seat, are they jamming the flight controls either because maybe they're large, maybe they have something on their knee, maybe they have something, never know the cases, but I'm telling you that flight controls check is critical.
Right. I've had it to where they're scooted up too close and you go to turn and it does hit their knees.
Right. And I will say this as well. If you do a flight controls check with somebody else in the other seat, you can hurt them by jamming it back. It's meant to be not a forceful maneuver, But, tell your person over there, hey, I'm fixing to do a flight controls check before you ever start the airplane up, and do that. And that way they have a chance to get their stuff out of the way. And it's just good piloting.
Right.
I'm telling you, it's just good piloting. That's all there is to it. But I will tell you, you can get a flight control jam in a PA-46 in flight. And this is one that very few people understand, but it has to do with icing. And in a PA-46, you can have ice that basically bridges across the elevator horn to the horizontal stabilizer. There's an area across there that is not protected from ice. You look at virtually any other airplane that's a high-performance airplane, TBM, King Air, any jet out there, and they have a protrusion from the horizontal stabilizer that protects the gap between the elevator horn and the horizontal stabilizer. And most people ask the question, why do you even have an elevator horn on there? And the answer is for counterweight. And the tip of that elevator horn is counterweight to balance the elevator. Very, very important. So you don't get flutter in the airplane. So almost any airplane that has any kind of speed whatsoever is going to have a elevator horn with weights on the end of it that's going to be used to balance that surface. But that gap between the elevator horn and the horizontal stabilizer must be protected from ice. And in the PA-46, there's no elevator extension, or there's no horizontal stabilizer extension. So you can get ice in the gap. There's a little, 1/8-inch gap that happens there, and you get ice. It's going to happen on both sides. So, and you get a bunch of ice, you can't get it off, and you end up with a place where you can't move the flight controls. And when you can't do that, you got yourself in a world of hurt.
So is that all of the PA-46s?
No. Well, yes, all the PA-46s have the same phenomenon. For whatever reason, the M600, M700 are the only two versions that have a heating element on there. I'm hopeful one day somebody's going to put an STC to be able to have that elevator horn be protected by the heating element. That clearly works. It works on M600, M700. I hope that's going to be something that we can add to every PA-46. It'll be something I'm a strong advocate for if that occurs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing, you got to think, what happens if you do get into icing and you have this elevator stickiness that occurs, or this jammed elevator? And the answer is you want to hand fly the airplane. And the reason why you want to hand fly is you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that movement of the elevator. If it starts to stick and you go, man, it's not moving, you're going to wrap the controls. You're going to move the controls just a little bit and be like, oh yeah, Joe told me about this. And really the POH tells you about it too. There's a place in the POH that talks about, in the emergency section, that talks about what to do. And the answer is you got to fly the airplane, move the flight controls to try to keep it so that the ice doesn't stick. Get out of the conditions you're in. In other words, climb, descend, laterally move the airplane to a place where there's not that ice. And then the last one is, if your autopilot's on, you got to turn off the autopilot. And this is why people talk about it all the time. I'll always fly the autopilot. No, you might not. You get into icing conditions, even with a functioning autopilot, if you have ice bridging across the elevator horn, well, now your pitch servo, which is moving the elevator and the whole elevator, you're moving the flight controls, your pitch servo moves that. Your pitch trim servo moves the pitch trim. So that's where the wheel's at, the pitch wheel. And so what you can have, if you have a jammed elevator, your pitch trim will try to alleviate those control pressures, and it'll move the flight control wheel all the way into one direction. And let me just tell you, if you're going fast, you don't have enough strength. I don't have enough. Nobody has enough strength to hold that elevator against a fully trimmed airplane out of trim.
Right.
If it's down, you're going to dive for the ground. If it's up, you're going straight up in the sky. It's going to be an absolute dastardly event. You do not want it.
Yeah, and if you're above your maneuvering speed in that situation,
absolutely,
you're going to risk structural damage no matter what.
Absolutely. Let me guarantee you that is going to be the case. This is one of the situations where you want to be below maneuvering speed for sure. Slow the airplane down if you have ice that's bridging across your tail. It could be an absolutely dastardly event. So the key is, if you get into icing conditions, any icing conditions in a PA-46, hit your trim switch, which turns off the pitch trim, and now you're hand flying the airplane. You still have your flight director up.
Mm-hmm.
Still have your flight director. So you have process data to help you tell where to put the flight controls and then get out of that icing situation that you're in. Yeah. I've got some pictures. I've had this happen probably 3 times to me in flight. And all 3 times were ones where I didn't recognize the autopilot's on in icing conditions, and for whatever reason didn't turn off the stupid pitch trim. And you deviate just a little bit from altitude, and all of a sudden the autopilot's trying to push you back forward, like you deviated high, it's pushing you forward. It can't, and the autopilot trim begins to move. You move the flight controls, and the ice pops off, and the airplane dives down. Oh, it's just you talk about, and you're already in icing conditions. You're in the clouds. It's prime time for spatial disorientation.
That's what I was fixing to say. Is spatial disorientation is
it can absolutely induce it, especially if you're like have your head to the right or to the left. If you're looking out on the wing and the ice pops up and it dives you down, and you move your head up. Now it just gives you this tumbling effect. Coriolis illusion could happen. It could be an absolutely dastardly event. Yeah. So as we talk about, this came up when we were talking about Rob Holland, and basically all of us at KC Aviation were thinking to ourselves, man, how could this happen? Well, how could Rob Holland crash an airplane? Wasn't he the best of the best? And he is. There's zero doubt about it. Zero doubt about it. Best of the best out there. But you have a jam flight control. And again, you now move from the pilot in command. You're now the passenger in command.
Yeah, you said it takes the pilot out of the equation.
It takes them out. Pilot can't move the flight controls. So you can't interface with the air. And I'm telling you, a flight control malfunction is a dastardly, deadly, possibly fatal event. You've got to take a flight control malfunction. If you do a flight control check and you feel a little something that's not right, get that checked out. I've seen flight control wires that jumped off the pulley and now are rubbing between the pulley. I've seen airplanes where somebody overloaded the tail of the airplane, meaning they put a bunch of people in the back of the airplane falls back on the tail, shoves the tie down up into the tail, and which is where the flight control pulleys are attached, and then decided, well, I'll fly this to a maintenance facility, and now they have loose flight controls. I've seen all kind of weird things that have occurred in this PA-46 world, but the quick answer is don't have a flight control jam.
That's right. I remember back, it's probably been a couple of years ago now, had the airplane I was flying was in for a maintenance event. It came back out, sat in the hangar for a few days, and I went to go pull it out to go fly. Did my standard walk around. When I moved the elevator up, I was like, I heard something. And I was like, well, that's obviously, that doesn't sound, that's not a normal sound. So after further investigation, they had worked on the tail and they had left a tool.
There you go.
In there, which would have caused a jam flight control.
Absolutely.
So it can happen.
Absolutely. Especially after a maintenance event. You have any maintenance event for any reason whatsoever, that's a great time to do a really comprehensive pre-flight, including a flight controls check that's part of that.
That's right.
Yeah. Rob Holland, we will be sadly missed. The family and the friends of Rob Holland, I'm so sorry that this occurred. Great aviator, great person. This is a guy I would have loved to have met. I never met him personally, but his legacy is going to be with us for a long time in aviation. He's the best of the best, but the best of the best can't overfly a flight control, and neither can anybody else. Flight control jams, they're super, super important that you don't get one. Joe Casey and
Clint Goff
signing off.